if your legacy is unique in the way that you contribute your identity and skills to your family business? Welcome this lovely Friday to the Design Your Legacy podcast. I have the pleasure to introduce you to Martha Siemer Stice. She is a sixth generation family business member, as well as the shareholder of the Siemer Milling Co, a leading processor of soft wheat flour in the United States. She's also the founding chair of the Siemer Family Council and a director of Siemer Milling. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is my pleasure to host you as a guest speaker this lovely day. And what an amazing family business story that goes back 6 generations.
Yes, it is an impressive legacy.
Yes, yes. But I would also like to start with you because you are more than just your family name and your family business. So would you share a bit about yourself growing up, where you went to school, and then your family business and those types of details?
Sure. So I grew up in a very small town. It's the town where our business started, where our headquarters are. It's called Teutopolis, Illinois, which is like town of the Teutons, town of the Germans. And when I say small, I mean really small. We're less than 2,000 people. So very rural upbringing. I went to school. I started at Pepperdine University on the West Coast. So it was, a big jump. I wanted different. I wanted just a very new experience, right? I was really excited about that. But that was not a great fit for me. I ended up graduating from Eastern Illinois University, which is just 30 miles up the road from where I grew up. But what was great about Eastern was that I fell in love with sociology. I discovered that department at the university and just had a great time with that. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with sociology? Everybody asked me. I said, I don't know, but not social work. And then I took intro to social work and fell in love with social work and ended up at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, pre-Gaines, pre-fixer-upper days.
Yes, Chip and Joanna Gaines.
Yes, pre them. Waco was very different then. Anyway, I got my master's in social work from Baylor University. I actually ended up with a church social work focus, which I bring up because as I started thinking about your questions and legacy and how my life story has unfolded, I realized that what my goal in that was really around how an organization can support its members, and then also how that those members support their larger community and interact with that city or community.
That's lovely.
So there's my education. I've got married to my husband just before moving to Texas, and we ended up back in Teutopolis, Illinois. It's where we've been for the past 15 years, and I have 5 children. 15, 13, 11, 8, and 6. Everybody always asks, so I always just throw it in there. So that's me and my family.
That's wonderful. And I know you also have a connection with the Family Business Network as well.
Yes. In 2012, Siemer Milling Company, we nominated ourselves and won medium-sized family business of Illinois through Loyola Family Business Center. And that center was connected with the Family Business Network. And that was really where I jumped into education or in the family business world. And it was like a breath of fresh air for me to come and go and be around people who understood what it was like to be in business with people you were related to, and how that the complex emotions that impacted the business decisions. And, in family business, you're almost immediately enmeshed. And so talking about how you parse those worlds and how you recognize these different pieces so that you can still function as a business and function as a family. So I ended up, I did several things, including a governance institute through Loyola Family Business Center. That was really an excellent experience in learning about governance and board development. And then at some point in there, the Family Business Network and Loyola Family Business Center parted as became really two separate entities. And I said, hey, I really think that all of this education and hearing from other people was so useful for me. And I'd like to help out. I'd like to contribute. There's a next gen community in FBN, and maybe I could come and do something with that. They were looking for committee members. So I said yes to that. I became the chairperson for that committee, really more out of a lack of other people stepping up, but that's okay. I was willing, and I was willing to learn.
You were volunteered or voluntold.
Voluntold, maybe. I really did volunteer, but then they said, could you do this part too? And quickly, so that came with a seat on the FBN board. So I participated, and then our chair had to step down from the chair position, had to step away because of other commitments with work. And they nominated me to be the chairperson for FBN. So I've been in that position for a little over a year now. And it's been a big learning curve and an excellent experience.
Thank you for speaking into all of that. And we're going to get into the emotional dynamics in a moment regarding family businesses, because it takes a high level of emotional intelligence and one's emotional quotient to either recognize boundaries or to make sure boundaries are there, because you've spoken to that very valuable word called enmeshment that a lot of the times people are blind to unless they increase their awareness to realize how they're interacting or how they're making assumptions. And so it's really powerful in order to maintain healthy relationships. And it becomes very intentional if somebody wants to care and they want to do good and not just, take the easy way out of, well, that's the status quo and that's the way we've always done it. It takes a lot of intention to show up and to want to recognize, like, you are you, and you might wear many different hats, and not to manipulate those.
Yes, agreed.
Yes, but let me go back in time for a moment, and I will back the train up. What did you want to do? What did you want to do or become when you were younger in your dreams as a child?
What I really remember telling people I wanted when I was a kid was that I wanted to be a hairstylist. I liked playing with people's hair. Don't expect too much out of me, really, but I liked playing with people's hair. But I also, what I remembered about going to a salon was like talking to people and having these conversations. And I think that's really what I was getting at that, was that I think I'd really like just talking to people.
Well, connection is a wonderful thing. And yes, people open up to their
hairstylist.
hairstylist,
Yes.
as if they're the priest or the rabbi, or
yeah, there's definitely a little bit of therapist going on. I feel like I was on the right track.
Yeah, that's lovely. I definitely have gone to Sassoon Salon and opened up my heart, and probably a little bit of TMI. Yeah. Well, I think I wanted to ask that question because, again, you're a whole human being, and we're going to talk about the family business component. But I also wanted to be able to ask you, about who you are as an individual, because sometimes that can get skipped over, and I think it's an important part to see all parts of the human being that's in front of somebody.
I contain multitudes. I say that to people a lot. Well, we all contain multitudes.
and all of those parts are elements of a holistic legacy. So it's not just like Martha, the family business member.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share about that?
No, I think, that's what, I could say that, the other thing, I guess, connected to, I wanted to be a hairstylist. I really like talking with people. And then I ended up getting my MSW, my master's in social work. But I've never been employed as a social worker, but I can really see how I've used those skills along the road in governance and developing a family council, working with my family to do that, and board work in general. So it's kind of a neat thread.
Yes. Well, I think it's quite lovely because you're dealing with people and emotions, and we all have to play nice, and all of the what I call life skills and human skills and relationship skills that are more than just soft skills. This is the heavy work of making distinctions. And
yeah, I love that. It's not just soft skills, it's heavy work.
It's intentional, and I think the brain uses a lot of calories, not just when we take our SAT exams, but also when we become, again, I'm using that word intentional, but when we show up and we want to do good and we notice the details and the pink elephants in the room and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've been an owner for about 17 years. So
It's
tell me
true.
about what it was like 17 years ago. You're a next gen and you're about to assume ownership. Can you tell me the story?
Yes. So it really was, I grew up with the family business. My dad is the president. So discussion around the dining room table was absolutely around the company. And it was talked about like, you could have a job at Siemer if you wanted to pursue that. But I didn't really have a full understanding of ownership. I knew who the owners were, my aunts and uncles, my parents, but I didn't really I don't know. I can look back and see that I didn't really. But honestly, like ownership was like, well, we're going to start transferring shares. I think it was very well thought out on my parents' part. This was in part estate planning. This is in part thinking about transition. I'm the oldest of three siblings, and I was 23 at the time. So that ownership, and that's when I assumed a seat on the board also. But it's really been a lot of on the job, quote unquote, training in my family and my experience. But I didn't have a whole lot of preparation ahead of time.
I found it so fascinating. And I shared with you that I did some due diligence, some research before our
Yes.
conversation today. And I was like, wow, there would have been, and I'm not sure if it was at that time compared to today in terms of what's written on the website, but there was three different locations. And the company had a valuation of a very large number. And I thought, wow, I guess you would have been in your 20s, perhaps early 20s, and you just
Early
confirmed
20s.
that. Yeah. So even
Yep.
if they had methodically been smart about it, it's like, congratulations, Martha, you're 23 and we've got this gift for you. And that's a big responsibility.
It's a big responsibility. It was a smaller company at that time. It was two locations, and there's been increased capacity at one of those locations since then. But our growth since then, since slightly before then, has been just really phenomenal. We're part employee owned, part ESOP, and that's really what we attribute a lot of our success to over the past 20 years, is just that ownership of employees and their pride, all of our pride in what we're doing.
That's a lovely team effort then. So I just want to bring up for a moment. So you were 23. And so then did you walk the floor? Did you say, I'm going to get my hands in the wheat? Like
Oh,
what
yeah.
was it like?
Well, I started getting into Siemer Milling Company when I was about 12. I
Okay.
did odd jobs. I did some research work on other mills, went through old um, balance books, and then when I was 16, I survived 2 weeks in the sanitation crew vacuuming up flour dust, which, fun fact, is highly combustible. So in the summer, and then I got offered a job at a Girl Scout camp, and I said, I'm gonna go play with kids now, thanks. But I did not walk the floor. We have a pretty open, uh, it's I don't want to say pretty open in terms of we're loosey goosey. We're following food grade restrictions. Food safety is really important. But I've definitely gone on many tours. I've I could walk through the office and talk to any of the staff. They knew me by name. I knew most of them by name. So there's always been that sort of openness.
Yeah. I find it so fascinating because again, I have this idea that's a lot of responsibility. But I think if you started at age 12 to become familiar with it, it was just kind of like an extension of the family. Like instead of it being the garage, it was like the two satellite locations.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, we call it the mill. Going up to the office. Going up to the office. I need to make copies. Can I run up to the office? And I've honestly worked a little bit to be a little bit more specific in what I'm naming with my own children, just so that they hear that, Siemer Milling. I'm going up to the Siemer office, the Siemer Milling Company office, or whatever. Um, so.
Yeah. Yes, that's lovely. And one of my questions was about the education. Like, was there mentorship, or was it just watching your parents? And and then was the succession in terms of the shares a shift from your parents, or was it like the aunt or the uncle, or
My shares are shipped from my parents.
Okay.
Gift tax restricted, but just a few shares every year within those gift tax restrictions. And then in 2010, they created a family limited partnership to more fully share ownership with myself and my siblings. And then training, I mean, honestly, it's only half a joke that I sat at the board table and looked down the table to see how I was voting. I will say though, like at our board meetings, we have a all family board, and we work hard at developing consensus around our decisions. So there's been very few board decisions made where there were opposing votes, just because of the way we try to have conversations first.
Yeah, that's lovely. It sounds like a very healthy, positive culture. Were there any other surprises at 23?
I mean, it was just all new. I was new to finance statements.
Ooh,
That was probably the biggest thing, and making sure I got the lingo, margins being higher or being lower. Wait, is that good or is that bad? I don't. Okay, let's follow the number path and see what makes sense here. So that was a learning curve for sure.
I just
Um,
I just want to insert right now that I think that it's lovely that financial literacy was there, because I wish more women at any and all ages could read an income statement and a balance sheet so they don't get surprised at any point in life, especially later on. So
mm,
I think it's lovely
yes,
that you were 23 and it was right in front of you. And of
yeah,
course, it was expected, but it's still just such an invaluable skill. So let me go back in time again to the
okay,
history of the founder or the founding
yeah.
generation. How and why did they start the company? Where was the patriarch from? Like, what's the backstory?
Well, Clemens Upmore is an interesting person. He is my 3 times great grandfather, was an interesting person. He immigrated from Germany, started in Cincinnati. He and a few other immigrants walked from Cincinnati to Illinois, and to scout out land for a settlement. And they found this piece of land where I am now, in Teutopolis. So walked back to Cincinnati, told some people about it, walked back again to purchase the land. I think it was like 3 full trips, but so they settled in Teutopolis, Illinois. It's along Route 40, which is the old national trail. A lot of people moving out west use this path. And he was really invested in his community. He was the postmaster for 30 years. He started mercantile. He ran a packing house. He was the co-owner of the windmill, the 4-arm windmill that burned down in, I think, the late 1870s. And he also bought whiskey by the barrel and sold it by the jug to other townsfolk. I thought that was pretty fun. So when the windmill burned down, there was, it's a farming community. They needed a way to grind their wheat. And this is also right around the time when the roller mill technology was being developed in Germany or Switzerland, somewhere in Europe. And he said, hey, maybe instead of a windmill, let's try this steam engine roller mill technology. So it's Hope Roller Mills, Upmore and Siemer proprietors. So it started by the first and second generations, Clemens Upmore, his son Clemens Upmore, and my great grandfather Joseph Siemer started Hope Mills in 1882. In 1906, it became Siemer Milling Company with Joseph and his son Clemens. And here we are today in 2023.
I love
With
that.
6 generations. Actually,
Yeah.
there's more born. There's 7. So there's an
So
8th generation. There's an 8th generation little girl out in Colorado.
that's lovely. So was the initiative to be entrepreneurial? And then I'm wondering, what is the distance if he walked? Was that like 3 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours?
Yeah, I think it was a few days.
Oh, that's what I was
Yeah,
wondering. I don't
I
have
think
a
it
map
was.
in front of me, but they must have brought some tent equipment and
found a pub along the, public house, a place that rented a room or two, or just even from a house along the road. I think they did that sometimes too. But yeah, um, a few days walk.
That's wonderful. So was the initial um, interest just entrepreneurialism? Like, let's get out some land and make something great?
I think a little bit of both, because like I said, it's a rural community. These Germans, they were growing their wheat. They needed to grind the wheat. I was just reviewing some history to jog my memory on a couple things, and read that there was about 120 mills along the rail line between Indianapolis and St. Louis. So this is one of 120. But because they invested in the new technology, it was able to produce more. It survived longer. Most of those other mills went out of business. I don't know all my mill geography, so I'm not sure. But
I think that's wonderful. Yeah, I wondered because if there was like a backstory of like grandmother had this bread recipe or something, but it sounds like it was just the American dream then.
yeah, and to be clear, we do soft wheat flour. So if you want a little nerdy science on flour, you've got soft wheat flour and you've got hard wheat flour. Soft wheat flour is cakes, cookies, crackers, biscuits. We're in things like Duncan Hines cake mixes, Krusteaz baking mixes, frozen red lobster biscuits you can buy in the grocery store. That's fun information. I like to say the fun ones: hard pretzels, a lot of crackers. So we're not bread flour.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. Well, that is fun, and I love the backstory and how they have been able to keep it within the family because that's a story even and of itself. But we're not necessarily going to go into that today. But I just think that to know the narrative is amazing, and it just makes your roots fun, your history fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
actually sitting right now in the what we call the Siemer Heritage House that was lived in and built by Clemens Upmore and his wife, and Joseph Siemer and his wife. So
That's wonderful heritage. Yes. Another question that I want to circle back, it has to do with the responsibility when one becomes part owner of a family business. And I wondered at that time, um, how did it affect you? Or were you just ready for it because you had been around it since age 12? Or was it something like you really realized how much the support network mattered, or putting good friends in place and a good alliance, or having that balance of the morning ritual and having enough balance with self care? So I just wondered about this.
think at the time, I mean, I felt like it was a privilege at the time. It was pretty exciting. I was living in Texas and coming back home for board meetings. Um, and like I said, it was on the job training. I was learning as I went. My parents are, they've been shareholders this whole time. My dad is still president of the company. My brother has come along into management. It's been there quite a few years now. They're between my dad and my brother, they're in transition for my brother to assume the president position. So responsibility, but there was just so much hand holding along the way. There's always been shepherding, and um, just always open to learning opportunities and conferences, and sitting down with the spreadsheet, going over them at night with maybe a glass of wine or something, or get the board minutes and go, okay, or the agenda, and okay, explain this part to me. So yeah, a lot of responsibility, but I think I'm still not even fully aware, because there's still, I'm still next gen in a way. I'm now gen and next gen. Um, it's not all on me, and it won't ever be all on me. There's multiple people involved. So
Yes.
that's great. It's a shared experience. And I think that was part of developing the family council, was really improving and increasing the communication with other family members to keep that shared experience going.
Yes. Great. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It was a shared responsibility, so it wasn't just on your shoulders to have that like incredible pressure of like a company valued at $100 million today or something like that, and and you're 23 and you walk into like, okay, well, Martha, you can't make a mistake. It sounds like that they were very smart about it to make sure that you weren't going to collapse underneath the pressure, that
No.
the
Yeah, they
support was
definitely were.
definitely there. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful story. And what positive role models then that they thought through it?
I think so. I
Yes,
mean, it's a little bit day by day.
yes. And I would also acknowledge that you're what they might call a woman in family business.
Yes. And I feel that all the time. Just, what I saw or what I see my dad do, how my mom has contributed. And, she's that matriarch position that she's done so much of that spouse position. She's also been on the board of directors. In fact, today was her retirement from the board. So that was sad and exciting all at the same time. Good transitions.
Bittersweet.
Yeah. But she stayed home at least part-time. She did her own thing also. She was a teacher, part-time for GED students, so adults trying to go back and get their high school diplomas. Um, so seeing that and wanting to emulate so much of what she showed me, and then seeing my dad making much more in the decision-making roles, and also wanting to emulate a lot of that. So I find myself in this just trying to find balance a lot.
Yes. Well, I think what's so interesting is that in the roles that you take on, you're definitely a mother and proud to be a mother of five children. So,
Yes.
and you also take on this in wearing a corporate hat to understand the numbers and the financial statements. And I just love the fact that when you shared the history, yes, it did start with the men and the patriarchs, but now your mom was on the board and now you're on the board. And to see as society changes, the women have I think they always have a voice. It just depends on how public that voice is, because
Oh,
sometimes
that's good.
right, their influence can be private, and so
Yes.
yeah. So I love to see that that transformation, and just what a positive story to know that not only are you embracing it, but you're also not necessarily sacrificing anything, but being smart in how you move forward to, like you had said, to know where the lines are, and now you're the mom, and now you're the wife, and now you're the sibling, and now you're the shareholder.
Yes. Yes. Finding the different hats and creating a unique path that enables me to be home a significant amount of time. I've educated my kids from home for 7 years until just recently. And being able to navigate a way to find space for other things that were fulfilling for me or contributing to the family business. So that's been I feel like it's a bit of a unique path, because it's been solely in governance that I've really contributed and worked. And it's been so helpful to be in our hometown. We moved back and we live pretty much in my parents' backyard. And so my kids have terrible boundaries and run in over to grandma's house all the time. And my parents have pretty good boundaries and knock on the door first.
I love that about children. They just kind of barge in
Yeah.
until later on. Yeah, then they learn. But that innocence of just like blurting out and storming in. Yeah, because it's familiar. And yeah, and so
Yeah.
that's grandma that's familiar. Yeah.
And they
Um,
love it. They love it. My parents
yeah.
do.
So that's so interesting. So I just wonder then, when you went over to Pepperdine, I wonder if it was that you missed home and then you wanted to go back.
Honestly, it was. It was a big part of it.
Yeah,
I
and that's
tell
real. Yeah.
I was recently talking to a high school graduate and I was thinking back on my experience and I told her, be a joiner, because I was not enough of a joiner. Don't be afraid to be a quitter, but be a joiner.
And I think both are so valuable because there's a part that somebody can learn about themselves while they're away, but then they also realize, oh, maybe I took that for granted, or I really appreciate that and I want to return. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I know that I asked this question before, but I'm just going to circle back for a moment. So,
Sure.
was there any training or education? Because let's say there's a next gen member listening, and this is why in the
Mm,
repetition, sometimes I circle back.
yeah.
Sometimes somebody might not catch it the first time. But was there anything in particular that was incredibly valuable that helped you in your insights as you grew, both before you took on a position at age 23, as well as after, in developing the governance and stepping more into the shoes of ownership?
Yeah. I will speak first to my experience in um, with FBN, because I think you talk about training, and that has just been so instrumental for me, to be able to be a part of a network that values confidentiality. There aren't providers. It's not a place for advisors, but it is a place for family business members. And because that allows other family business members to share their stories, in gory detail sometimes. And you can relate to each other on a different level. And they do bring in content providers, educators, people who are doing research, or advisors with good knowledge to present information, and so often then connect that with somebody's story, somebody's lived experience, to give examples and provide conversation, topics for the people in the room. And so the other thing, which was not quite FBN, this was Loyola, that they had a governance institute that was run by Andrew Kite at the time. And it was like this really intense peer group experience for 2 years, with really great education on top of that. And I think that contributed the most in terms of my understanding of best practices in governance, and dealing with family in the boardroom and family outside of the boardroom, and creating boundaries and encouraging candid conversation, that respects emotions and feelings, but also recognizes the business decisions that need to be made.
Yes, thank you for speaking into that. I can imagine that it brings up many real world situations where it's like it's like what I call, like, the train is moving and you have to just deal with it. And there are the how do I describe it? It's sometimes it's like in the middle of that heat of a conversation, a discussion where decisions have to be made, and sometimes you just have to hear someone else's story of how they handled it, because there's 1,000 blind spots. And then when you can hear someone else's walk through, you're like, oh, your family also had that argument. And it not necessarily that has to be negative in terms of an argument, but it's like, well, how did you sort through it? Not just the money or the emotions, but it's just like the dynamics at the moment. Because
Yeah. And it's not even so much like, oh, that's how I should do it, step 1, 2, 3. It helps you see your situation in a new light. It might give you an idea of a new way to approach it, but it helps you really examine your own situation, I think.
yes, yes, very much. There's so much that like, let's say with like group, I would just bring up group coaching for a moment. When
Mm-hmm.
each person they speak, it's like you see the threads of like, oh, well, my situation might not be exactly like that, but oh my goodness, I can relate. And then not only
Mm-hmm.
do you feel less alone, but there are those nuggets of wisdom that you can kind of just store in the back of your mind, like in the back of like a filing cabinet. And
Yes.
um, know that when you come face to face with that, oh my goodness, again, that someone else has been there. Because if not, I think sometimes with leadership can come loneliness, but also just like you had talked about the confidentiality. You want to talk about it with people, but then if
Mm-hmm.
you can find yourself like not necessarily isolated, but just you have to be so discreet and careful. And then it's just such a breath of fresh air, like to hear someone else, even if there's those threads of similarity. It takes a little bit of
Yes.
the again, because leadership can be a lonely path, and you want to make the best decisions, but you also want to feel connected and
Yes. And
yeah.
belong, right? And you find that resonance with somebody else, that feels really
Oh,
there's relief there.
yeah, yeah. So, would you share with me what makes a great family council and then what doesn't?
So I'm pretty new to the family council game. I don't know if I can answer. What I think I've got a pretty great, like, my cousins that have stepped up and gotten involved. We created a task force over the summer of 2020. Met over Zoom like once a month. So that was great for that. We were like, well, my schedule is clear. Sure, we'll get together and talk about this. But they were all invested and interested. Um, Really, starting the family council for us came out of this need we had several sixth generation family members that were not in ownership and really they weren't close to the company. Their mothers are on the board and really active and excellent shareholders, but there just wasn't as much in that transition of knowledge. They were excited to go do other things, live in Colorado or otherwise. So there was this real need to introduce the company to them and kind of get some knowledge, now that I had learned things and gone to conferences, and I was like, oh, hey, we need to start having conversations and kind of finding out what they think about this company. And if they're the what is it, estate planning or transition planning for their families. We're not sure what they're planning to do, but we want them to be knowledgeable to make good decisions. So we started having some assembly meetings and talking through this idea of family governance, which is still, I can just remember how novel that was to me. Like, it's like creating a board for your family, or like it's an association membership, but it's your family. I just thought that was incredible.
It's like your own little country.
Yeah, exactly. So putting together a group who were interested in talking through, okay, what would this look like? What kind of documents would we want to have, and creating a charter and a constitution. So we worked through that together, and presented that to the larger family assembly, and got everyone who was there, definitely. I think everybody's pretty happy that we did the family council. I don't think we had anybody who was opposed to it. But to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this, and fund this through the company. And we were so what's been great about it is just involvement and interest and candid questions. I think we have some really good, just open questions, and it's this space. We created a space where you think, I don't know if I should know this, but I don't, so I'm just going to say it. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's talk about that. And you don't have to feel silly. I don't think anybody does. I think we bring anything about the company or the history, or about, wait, talk about this with milling again. What is that about? So I think that's what's really been great for us.
Yeah, I love the cohesion.
Yes.
And I know that there are a number of families, and when they do set aside that time, whether it's because of that council, or perhaps they have a foundation, whatever the purpose or the intention, there's so much good that comes out of that communication. Because just to meet once a week, it's like, not only do you get to know everyone's thoughts and opinions and stories and answers, but it just brings everybody closer together for a purpose other than just money or status or assets.
Yeah. I think we've done a good job of making sure that in the meetings we're talking about just family stuff. We've got conversations. Just I'm interested in you. Please talk about, what's happening with the family, or some updates. Because these were people that, I don't know, 2014 even, I knew them, question mark. Like, I know names. You talk about names and faces show up, and I'd be like, wait, who's here? Oh, that's Dan. Oh, right, Dan. Yeah, I know Dan. Sure. But now I really do know these people.
And that's wonderful. And if you actually like know Dan now, and he feels seen, heard, and understood, that's just the special, I don't want to be cheesy, but that's the special sauce. That's like the magic. That's the glue that brings people together, and they want to do good business, and they want to learn more, and they want to bring out the best of themselves, and then even more, maybe even talk about their values and shared values. But
Yeah.
so I know that I have a limited time with you right now. So would you share with me, what is it like for each successive generation since 1882? And some of this you might know, and some of it you might not know, or maybe some of this has come up in those meetings of the conversations when the whole group is being brought together. I just was curious, like maybe the G2 transferred some of best practices to G3, and then G3 knew and understood what worked, and then it became easier for G4.
Well, so there's been a lot of pruning in our family tree over the years. It helped that there was at least one only son. I mean, we went from first and second generation working together, and this is still a pretty small country mill. Like, we currently mill 4 million pounds of flour a day at our 3 facilities, but then it was closer to 2002, 20,000 pounds a day, which still sounds kind of like a lot, but I could be wrong. My dad will listen to this and correct me. But it was a lot smaller for sure. So it really has only grown significantly since the mid 90s. So first and second generation.
So was that G5 then?
Yes, that was under my dad. Yeah.
Okay.
First and second generation worked together. Second and third generation worked together. Third generation was an only son. So sisters, I don't know that they had much to do with the company. Fourth generation was my grandfather and my great uncle and my great aunt were really involved. She was the praying partner in the business. So that's sweet, I think. And it's her children, and then my grandfather's children inherited. I have 2 aunts and an uncle who had ownership and sold out 20 plus years ago, sold out their shares. There was some discord between my dad and my great uncle. So we do have a split there. That's, I think we've worked through those pain points, but that I think is, if you're going to learn from mistakes, and there's stories about the volume levels at board meetings in the 80s. So we're trying to find better ways now, right? Know better, do better.
When you say volume, are you talking about the loudest voice in the room?
I'm talking about some yelling.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the loudest voice in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And when you talked about the praying, was that faith? When you talked about the praying member?
Praying partner, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very Catholic community. Our heritage
prayer is powerful.
Yes, strong Catholic heritage. So yeah, she was a praying partner.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for a moment. So, that's wonderful. Well, anytime somebody gives good intentions, and that good energy, that can cause cause and effect something to
fantastic.
Blossom.
Yes.
Yeah. Like you can speak a blessing in someone's life just as you can speak a curse. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for the transparency, because that's very real. There's going to be the knowledge, but then there's also going to be the human dynamics.
Yeah. So as far as like growth of company and really thinking about best practices in the boardroom or in management, I really can't speak to the management in previous generations. I know what's going on now and in the more recent past, but I think it was so small, and what was really, I think I can look back and see that for the most part, what was really great was they, like I say there was yelling, there was some volume, and that was, my dad and my aunts and uncles and a couple other people. But we always got together on holidays. In fact, my grandparents, my grandpa Quint, who was president before my dad, and my grandma died in 1984. But family gatherings did not stop. Each sibling took a holiday, and we did birthdays. We did like a seasonal birthday party with them. So I think that was really kind of, their own best practice was to not let the discord or disgruntlement from the boardroom impact family time together.
The family dynamics. I love that. And I love how healthy your family is. And I love the fact that your dad might watch this.
We'll see. Maybe he'll say, no, never mind. I'll just let it go.
Well, I just think it's so valuable, especially with you being a next gen, whether you're 23 or, 43 or whatever the number is. Obviously, there's, yeah. But you're not 43 yet. But what I'm saying is,
I'm 40. I'll say it. I'm
yeah,
proud.
yeah, yeah. But I just think it's to hear a voice, of the what you called the next gen or the now gen. I just think it's so refreshing because, gosh, what is it like? It's not like a reality television crew is going to follow you around, and yet there's some curiosity. What is it like? Because there could be a family business in another state, Florida or Oregon, and yet, like you had talked before, it's, gosh, I wonder how they do it right. And like you said, there was a choice to make family holidays functional and loving and good, and a moment of
Yeah.
connection to have it. Yeah, there could be the passion inside the boardroom, because you do have to keep your finger on the pulse of the business, and yet to be able to leave it and know that the family is more than just the money, and the family is more than just the business. There's still, the love, and the blood is thicker than the water, or the blood is thicker
Yes.
than the money and the bottom line. Yeah, even if it does cause stress at times, because you want to do good, and the four fathers did well, and so you're carrying that torch. And
Right.
yeah, what has helped the most in creating and leading group governance? Like, what is truly effective? Just even one insight.
So my thought on this one is that this is really connected to my values that I identified. But finding, I want to say harmony. And I don't mean that everybody has to agree. That's what I have come to work, almost expect in my own family's boardroom, that we work really hard towards consensus to some extent. And that's not what you have to achieve, but you need to achieve candid, kind honesty, to remember that it's not personal. And I'm really big on, at least trying to see where the other person is coming from. Probably goes back to social work skills, but active listening, which is really hard in a boardroom, especially a family boardroom, because you have to be able to set your own self aside and hear what that other person is saying. And when it's your family business, that's a part of your identity a little bit. It's emotions get wrapped up in it, and you can be really eager to jump in and get your view across and not hear the other person. So I've really tried to promote hearing, checking in. If somebody's not talking, let's ask them if they want to make a comment about this, and encouraging candid, open comments and questions.
I love that. So then, in other words, like, please clarify, help me understand.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so
And
sometimes so simple. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, I think I noticed, like, when other people are trying to communicate and they're missing, and I'm like, okay, come on, you guys, we got this. I think you're trying to say this. Is that what you're hearing over here? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It can be like two airplanes flying in the night, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Two ships passing in the night, or yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
not a quite meeting at the mark.
Well, it's good then that you have those skills to be able to translate in the moment, because a lot does get lost, especially. But there's a term called a love language, and it's the
Yep.
same thing
Yep.
with like a communication language. Like, if I'm auditory and I hear things a certain way, or a certain style of language and verbiage, or even tone, or and that's what I think is acceptable, and so I'm just going to listen for that. But you might be very different in your perspective, and so that needs to be welcomed with open arms compared to dismissed. Because,
Yes.
yeah, all those differences can make a team stronger. So, in making progress, what has been one of the hardest part of bringing people together in a room to speak openly with one
Vulnerable.
another?
I mean, like, the hardest thing for me, I can remember asking to start some of these conversations, and the vulnerability. I can remember just, I I could reflect on hearing this past discord and the pruning that had happened in ownership, and going, I have 5 kids, guys. What am I setting them up for here? So it's just a really vulnerable thing for me to walk into that space and share with family, and at that time a lot of family that I wasn't very close to, and I didn't know how they'd take that.
Thank you for that transparency, because you're right. In wearing the different hats, you also have to wonder, like you had said, what is it that I'm passing on? And I know sometimes with financial conversations, it could be, am I passing on debt to my children? But also it can be um, all the other dynamics that come into play. So I appreciate your consciousness about it, a sensitivity,
Yes.
not just show up and here it is, and pick up, your the expression about the bootstraps, and toughen up and just, yeah, because it does affect people in different ways. And that was one of my previous questions to you. You're 23 and this ownership opportunity uh, is granted to you, and that is a privilege. And having said that, you have to be ready for it emotionally, on the inside, mentally, mindset, as well as the skills. And the skills, there's a learning curve, but it's also that capacity to rise up to meet that opportunity. So
Right.
yeah. So your company, and I saw this from the very cool video on the company website, mentioned it has a legacy in partnering with farmers. So that
Mm.
is the family business. But for you as an individual, what does the word legacy mean to you? And what would you like your holistic legacy to be?
Holistic legacy, that's good. So yeah, I had to really think about that. What is the long lasting impact that I want to have? And we've talked a lot about, like, wearing many hats or containing multitudes. And so I think right now what I really hope is that, if I think about the impact, particularly on my children, that they're seeing, here's mom not sacrificing in small ways, but still, okay, finding a way to be home with us a significant amount of time, to really focus on education, which is another one of my values, and yet she's also taking time to work in this way that um, gives her life, that she gets joy out of, that she is contributing to the family and the community, and to even to us, like, right, that I'm helping create a family business to pass on to them that will be healthy and stable, and something that they can take pride in.
I think that's
So
wonderful. Yeah. And they're watching you.
yes. And they're not always happy about, like, me going on trips and me doing this, and but at some point they'll see, could be ways away for sure, but that I kind of set up a like a model. That's what I'm looking for, a model that, oh, I can make a way that I can contribute that's unique to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you had shared about just the skills that you have around social work, because I think there's a part of it where, and I think you might even homeschool your children, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I don't currently. They're now going to an independent micro school, but we did homeschool for 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get to watch mom be a professional as well as be hands on with their education. I mean, that's a lot of love and a capacity of generosity to care about what they're learning, how they're learning, and I just, it's just filled with the value of love.
I hope that's how they view it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if they don't see it today, they will definitely look back. But if they get a little tender, if mom leaves for a business trip or a holiday or something, I think they appreciate the fact that you
Yes.
are hands on and very conscious about, how do I make this work? And if it is a new fork in the road, how do I balance, all of these different components so that a decision can be made and it can be as best win-win for all of the parties involved. And they're
Yeah.
witnessing all of that. How does mom make decisions? And most of all, it's, how does she step into her power to be brilliant, to read that financial statement, to be a voice in that boardroom, compared to you know maybe not having a presence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what would you say, as we come to a close, would be your top three values or a guiding principle?
I would say my top three principles are integrity, um, And I look at that as like maybe my outsides matching my insides, or my private person is the same as my public person. And I think responsibility kind of wraps up in that. I do what I say I'm going to do. Um, and then harmony or resolving conflict is another big one for me, which is why like dissonance in the boardroom is really, I feel like it's really hard. And then education. And I think like that integrity of saying, okay, when I saw these problems and these things in the greater school system that were a real struggle point. I didn't agree with how things were being done, and I wasn't seeing my kids light up or thrive. And we have really great schools here. I don't want to diss on the school system at all, but I said, okay, I have to take a step. I have to do something that matches how I'm feeling about this, or the things that I'm believing and seeing here.
Yeah. Well, if there is the creativity and the courage and the initiative to make a family business work, then you've got that skill set to say, okay, I can apply that here. I can also apply that there. And
Mm,
so I think it's wonderful problem solving.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Go mom.
Right.
And so lovely. So I heard integrity, harmony, and education. And I think,
Yes.
yeah, I just want to echo back that harmony, that's a valuable quality to bring to the boardroom so that people feel heard. And it doesn't have to be like a win-lose dynamic, like sometimes like maybe a century ago when they talk about like the John Wayne win-lose, like, "Grr." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Finding a solution that fits, that gets everybody something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else? Any closing thoughts on the subject of legacy, or a website that you would like to share, or any messages to the next gens and closing thoughts?
I mean, an opportunity to speak to the next gens. That's amazing. Um, just, find a group of people that you can relate to in a confidential setting. And shameless plug, check out fbnusa.org. There's a hyphen in between FBN and USA. Um, but there is a path for you. There's a place for you. Sometimes we have to ask that older gen, the now gen, to make some room. Um, ask ask some kind questions about their experience in rising into their position now. A really fun one is, what's like your biggest mistake in business? Ask them that. And don't be afraid to make your own path, whether it's with the family business or not.
Lovely, wise words. Before I read my closing paragraph out, I just would like to thank you for your transparency and sharing the history of the family business from the moment where they walked, whether it was 3 days in between, what was it, Cincinnati and
The Topolis.
yeah. I love the rich history, and just that again, that your people, you're just regular people trying to make the business work, trying to make the family work, and finding a way forward and making the best decisions possible. And also just hearing the initiative that's been taken over the years. It didn't just, happen, in one perfect generation. It's an ongoing effort. Just like when somebody goes to the gym, it's that they care about their health and they keep showing up and keep making good decisions as a way of life, and a lifestyle. And also the fact that your children barge in with the grandparents. I love that because it's still a
Yeah.
human at the end of the day.
Well, thanks so much, Angelina. It's been fun to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to read out the closing paragraph. So, in closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, USA, but international in those I consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're tuning in on Apple or Spotify podcasts, please remember to rate and review. Or if you're listening and watching on YouTube, please remember to subscribe, like, share with your friends and family, and so forth. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Martha, for speaking into your legacy.
Thanks so much.